Good morning to everyone. I'm glad I can join you. As you can see, Mark and I have known each other for a while. I've known Doc for a while, and come here to help guide a conversation that I hope you'll be part of. So my name is Troy Austin. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Athletics at Duke. Prior to my tenure here, and the reason for the loss of hair was 13 years as an athletics director at Longwood University. As we transitioned to Division I and gained conference affiliation, did a lot of great things. So again, I'm the moderator for today. Joining me are three very well established athletic directors. And they're going to talk specifically about the post-honeymoon period of being an athletics director. So kind of that 3 to 5 year phase as you start to get an understanding and comfortability in your surroundings. So with us this morning is Beth Goetz. She's Director of Athletics at Ball State University. She's finishing her 3rd year. Alex Ricker-Gilbert, he's a Senior Vice President and Director of Athletics at Jacksonville University. He's finishing his 5th year. And Eddie Nunez, he's the Director of Athletics, finishing his 4th year at New Mexico. Well, so let's first start with from hearing from each of our presenters a little bit about how they got into the chair. So this will kind of be their hero's journey into the athletics director chair. And so we'll go Beth, Eddie, and then Alex, and then we'll jump into kind of 3 areas of questions from that point forward. Beth?
Thanks, Troy. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone this morning. And it's so good to see everybody taking some time to engage. I know it cost the last part of last session, so I know it's going to be a great couple days for all of you. I got my start. I was a student athlete, played soccer at Clemson, and really had no intention to work in athletics, but was pushed by my coaches to explore at least doing some coaching while I was in graduate school. So it turned out I found I could continue my passion in athletics. So I coached and at a small Division II school in Missouri, at University of Missouri St. Louis for about 12 years. We wear a lot of hats at smaller institutions. So during that time, I also had the ability to engage in a lot of the administrative tasks and roles at the Division II level. And eventually just got intrigued with the bigger picture on the administrative side. So from there, I've had a few stops at Butler University, University of Minnesota, University of Connecticut, and then obviously I spent the last three years here at Ball State. One thing that I've really enjoyed about my experience is I've played a variety of different roles, both internally and externally, across my journey. And feel like that's been really helpful for me along the way to have those different experiences. So I think I'm actually at 3 years to the day here at Ball State. So look forward to chatting more with you guys this morning.
Thank you, Beth.
Appreciate it, Beth. Thanks, Troy. Great to see you. I see a lot of people that I've been a part of at different locations. And I know I've got one of my staff members here, Brandon. So great to see everybody here. I apologize in advance. So I am actually in the middle of Kentucky somewhere driving my kids to camp. So what you see is what you get. And if you have some back noise, it's because I'm in a coffee shop. So again, not know where the heck I'm at right now. So no, listen, my career started very similar. I was a student athlete, had the ability to play college athletics. My basketball coach at the time was Billy Donovan, and he thought for me, my path was to be a coach. And as anybody usually does, they just listen and say, let's go, let's do it. And coached for several years, was graduate assistant there, went to Marquette. And always at the end of the day, when I was at Florida, I had an opportunity to work with Jeremy Foley and others in the athletic department, which gave me a lot of understanding of what college athletics was about. And I wanted to know more. And I remember reaching out to Jeremy when I was at Marquette and told him, look, I'm really inspired about this athletic side. I want to try to figure out if the college administration is what I want to do. And he said, well, try it out. There's an opportunity at Vanderbilt, go interview and see what happens. And I did. They offered me an opportunity. The rest is history. From there, I never looked back at my decision to get an administration. I've loved every bit of it. Took the approach from facilities and development and new projects. That gave me an opportunity to go to LSU, where from there I had really an unbelievable experience of work with some great staff members, some great leaders, Skip Bertman, Dan Radakovich. I mean, there's so many that you can name that are here today and others in other places that gave me the ability to learn and understand the internal side, the external side, the fundraising component, every aspect that I could. And 14 years later, left there as a deputy athletic director. I took this role at the University of New Mexico. For me, it was about being at an institution that was a flagship institution that gave me the ability to really grow as not just as an athletic administrator, but also as an academic in the academic side. So I'm fortunate, been here 4 years. We've had to endure a lot of challenges, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'm excited. We have a great thing going for us right now with our teams, our coaches, our staff. So really excited. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Alex?
Thanks, Troy, and thanks to Eddie and Beth. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here with you. See a lot of familiar faces and glad to be able to share and learn from each of you and from our fellow presenters. Alex Ricker-Gilbert, AD at Jacksonville, starting my 6th year here as AD, 8th year at the university. My path is a little bit different. I went to school at Penn State. I was not a student athlete, but thought that the college athletics career was something that I wanted to do from a very early sort of age. I had family members that worked in it. And so I was able to intern at Penn State in their Morgan Center for Academic Support. And I went to grad school and did my internships and thought to myself, it was a similar time to this in that the market was sort of restricted. There weren't a ton of jobs. Departments were downsizing. It was around the 08 recession. So I said to myself, what's the one area of athletics that the least amount of people want to work in? And that's the area that I'm going to choose. And it was compliance. And so I got my break in compliance and ended up really enjoying it. Went and worked at Villanova and Westchester University and Purdue Fort Wayne. And then after Purdue Fort Wayne, was able to spend time with Troy Austin. I was probably some of the reason for his hair loss there. Back at Longwood, was there for 3 years as an assistant AD and head of compliance and worked in academic services and did some sport administration. And then from there, I went down to Jacksonville, where I am now, to oversee academics and compliance for about 1.5 years, and was able to move into the athletic director chair in 2016. And what I'll say is, and I know you all are learning this, and it's a big part of why you're here, it's all about relationships with this deal. And I was able to get to Jacksonville because of relationships that I had with coaches at prior stops. And it's not just relationships among administrators and presidents, it's relationships among everybody on your staffs, because you'll never know who's going to have influence on you for your next stop and for future stops. So every day is an interview, and it's great to learn through doing that. So glad to be here with you and excited to share more.
Thanks, Alex. Well, so we'll leave the baton in your hand then in terms of sharing more. As I said before, this 3-year period during which you kind of realize the honeymoon is over, the welcome parties and events and donor initial meetings are done with. Do you recall that moment when the honeymoon was over for you and reflect on that?
Yeah, I do. And I've, it's can be called the honeymoon period or the patience period. And I think it's It's a little bit, it depends on obviously the institution you're at. And so you have to understand what the expectations are, right? If the expectations are to win now and win big, that honeymoon period might be quick. And for me, that was not the expectation. I was taking over a situation where we really needed to build infrastructure and develop our priorities and create values and what we were really trying to do. And so we were able to do that in our first 2 years with a lot of freedom and a lot of excitement around what we were trying to do. And with that, we were pretty successful athletically in year 2. And I was feeling really good about things and about myself and how things were going. And then year 3 came to your point about sort of settling in. And we did all the structural infrastructure type items, value creation and hiring that we thought we needed to do. And on the athletic side, things fell apart. We had a really tough year in 18-19. And it was about March of my 3rd year, I realized that setting the department up with sort of the blocking and tackling that you need to do to establish your base isn't going to be what you need to do for long-term success and how you're going to be able to sustain success. You know, the successful season, athletic season or year that we had the year prior was just that. It was a good year. It was not what we were going to be able to do for a sustained period of time. And so at that point, when we were really struggling, there was question with what we were doing with the coaches that we had, with the environment that we were creating on the athletic side. And we needed to take a step back and take a 30,000 foot view on our strategy and where our priorities were and what that really meant. And so right around midway through my 3rd year, we really dug into the bigger picture, put together a strategic plan, actually brought Doc Sander down to do that and move forward in that way. And things have turned since then, but it was definitely a learning period to know that those blocking and tackling items that you need to do are not necessarily going to set you up for long-term success.
Awesome. Beth, Eddie, anything to add to that? Well, great. So I'll actually, to that point about those adjustments and kind of combine this with thoughts around making major decisions. Beth, you know, what was your approach on paper? What were your in-game adjustments? And then in terms of really when you're talking about adjustments, that's resources, budget, but also personnel. You know, how'd you reshape your leadership team and some of those things that once you did your initial evaluation and assessment, what are some of the things you did to adjust your squad?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. You know what, I actually think this ties in really well to what Alex mentioned here, because, you know, for all the coaches and athletes, we all come in with a game plan, right? But it really is 100% about the in-game adjustments. Very rarely do you have a plan in your mind, or your team comes up with a strategy that isn't going to involve some tweaks. So certainly as you arrive on a campus, you don't and you don't know it well enough yet. You also, the environment on a campus, you know, 1 year is going to look drastically different than perhaps the next, for financial reasons or the success of your program. So I think you learn pretty quickly, at least I did, that the framework is valuable, and you've got to do your homework in advance and have an idea of what path you want to get to, that you want to use to get someplace, but you got to know you're going to have to make some tweaks. And so I would just maybe share 2 things that were really relevant for me. One around personnel was, you know, you sort of look at maybe places you've been before or across the country and say, hey, it'd be great to have all my personnel strengths fit in these nice little boxes. So this group's going to handle this external piece, and everything is going to fit nicely into that shared space. And then you're going to have a group that's going to do just student services, maybe have this set of sports. But that's not how individuals in an organization necessarily present in terms of their own strengths and or interests. And so I had to, really try to find a way to utilize what their areas of strengths and interests were that didn't necessarily align perfectly. So you got somebody that's going to come and maybe oversee a good handful of external areas, but you needed them to manage a particular internal operation because they were the best suited to do that, or it was a gap in their own maybe experience and resume in a place they wanted to grow. And so that was one where I think sort of mid-game you're making some adjustments, and it doesn't have to look exactly right on paper, but you want to function in a way that you're going to put each of the players on your team in a place that they can be successful, and that'll raise the level of success for your entire department. So I think that was one that was really interesting. And I think the second one example that I would use, which is both probably financial and personnel, was maybe the role I thought that would exist for me personally, but also for our department on campus. So our president really embeds athletics as a part of his leadership team, and that takes a significant amount of time and focus. And it turns out I really enjoy some of those pieces, but it also gave me a quick introduction into how we were going to collaborate meaningfully with campus, and not just in a way about how others can help serve our athletes, but how can what we do in athletics serve the institution. And so it really just, I think, I had to reorganize how I thought I would engage and how much time I'd be spending in other areas outside of athletics across our institution. And it's really been a positive, but that would be another example of sort of those in-game adjustments that I've had to make that, again, as long as you're open to those, I think they've all ended in a way that's been beneficial for our department, but certainly maybe not what I would have expected walking in the door.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Well, I want to add to that, and I'll just say, from my perspective, the honeymoon ended the day I did the press conference. That's when they rolled out. By the way, I'm sorry, I didn't even say hello to Doc Sanders. Good to see you, sir. It truly did. I mean, I think everybody goes in with these eyes open and saying, look, it's going to be great. I'm sitting in the chair. Well, first of all, it's great to sit in the chair, but it's also understanding now what falls on your desk. And I remember walking in as soon as my press conference was over. They had an event at the president's house, and he actually asked me to go to his house early so I can meet with him. And I knew something wasn't right, and then went to his house. I really felt like eerie going to his little study, and next thing you know, he's rolling out the red carpet and telling me everything that's left that I had to deal with, the 7 audits, the 4 internal investigations, the DOJ, 2 DOJ inquiries as far as NCAAs. And so it just kept on rolling. And I'm sitting there thinking, can I run? Can I leave? What can I do now? Because this is what I remember seeing people like Doc and others when they were sitting in the seats. They couldn't have done this. This couldn't have been. So I tell everybody the honeymoon ended quickly, because at that point I had to turn my attention to what do I need to do to get this place right? And it wasn't about myself. It was finding out, as all you know, to be successful, you need to have great people around you. And that was one of the biggest factors for me. Unfortunately, again, I had situations where individuals had long contracts, things that just financially couldn't make it happen. So when you sit here and say, what did I learn? I learned, first of all, again, the importance of just what it is to take an opportunity, be true to your values, always in all your decisions. You're going to make decisions that sometimes, again, I had to make some tough decisions. I had to, one of the directives from my board of regents was I had to cut sports. I ended up cutting 4 sports a year into my position. So when you sit there and you think all the things that I had to endure, it's part of it. But I look back now, it makes us stronger. If you make the decisions based on your values and everything else, again, it goes back to what have you learned? Well, learned a lot. I've learned the importance of people. I learned the importance of making true decisions based on your values, at the right decisions. At the end of the day, not every decision is going to be easy, but it has some of them have to be made, and it's not going to be easy. But if you can put like I tell people, if you can put your head on the pillow at the end of the night and know you stuck to your values and you did it the right way and you did all your due diligence, then you can move on. You can move on with a positive attitude. So a lot of things I've learned. I could be here all day. I don't want to be, because I know there's many other things we can discuss. But the greatest part is being able to surround yourself with people that know value the same way. And then as we go through this business, you're going to see people start buying, not just buying into the vision, but you actually live in the vision that you've put out there on the table for people to see and do.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. I appreciate that. So, actually, Beth mentioned something about, being part of the president's cabinet and senior leadership team. I'd be curious your thoughts. Specifically, what'd you learn about the president? We just had two presidents give their perspective, and we can give the AD's perspective upward. What'd you learn about the president and your peers on the leadership team that helped you in some of those challenges, or even some things you learned about them that you had to make some adjustments?
Sure. I think one of the things that you always hear from all of us is the word culture, the word alignment. And the reality is the alignment is really just as important as anything else, because you heard it from the presidents right before this, the alignment with their ADs, how they go about it. I was very fortunate in some respects that the president that hired me was an interim president. So he was on his way out. The president that came in 6 months after me, Dr. Garnet Stokes, unbelievable woman who has been at places from Georgia, Missouri, Florida State, and she was a part of those many challenges that were at those institutions. If you think back at Missouri, you think back at Florida, you think about some of those, Florida State, with James Winstead and all this stuff. To know that I have a president that's been through the battles in athletics and understands what it entails. I had to, again, she had very limited decision when it came to me presenting Cutting of the Sports. That was the first thing that she and I embarked upon. And she was right behind me the whole way. And what she has done is also is by putting me on her leadership cabinet with the provost and 4 others. It allows me to be involved in every decision that's key on campus, but also gets them to understand all the pieces. We have to be one. I know it's a saying, everybody wants to be one university. Well, you have to try to live it every day. And if you have a president who understands it and is aligned with you, it makes this job so much more fulfilling. I mean, honestly, there's been opportunities presented to everybody, and I'm no different. And those opportunities also remind me of how important it is to have somebody that you can look back and say, she's got your back or he's got your back. So for me, it's extremely important to have that ability to be involved with campus, with administration, with a president who truly gives you the ability to grow, gives your student athletes the ability to grow as well, and do it as one.
Eddie, that's it. I think he couldn't have probably said that better. I know we all talk about, right, it's most important to figure out who you're going to work for and who you're going to work with. And that's really where we should make some of those decisions. And we think about that being, what our coaches look like in our senior team, but that's really a critical piece is the president. And I know I feel incredibly fortunate here with our president, Jeff Burns, who was a former Division I athlete as well. And that alignment is critical. But what I figured out, and probably in the first week, and not to digress, but at that first day, just really anticipate they're going to give you the stack of all the real things, because that's true for, I think, all of us. That envelope is showing up right after the press conference. But I think I learned in the first week, our cabinet here is as much my team, a part of that team, and whether they're helping me or I have a chance to help them, it's just a really critical piece to how you function day in and day out. And so you become reliant on those teammates just like we do internally. And so I think it's just incredibly important to understand what the president and his other leaders, how they see athletics, how you can serve them, and what they want to see from the mission of your department as well.
Hey, Troy, can I add one thing quickly just to this?
Definitely.
And it's more of an advice, since we're talking about presidents. You just heard our president. I know Alex probably feel the same way. everybody who's on this right now, I recommend that you do your due diligence to make sure you get connected now to provosts, to deans. It's so important. First of all, many of these are probably going to be presidents at some point, and you never know who's going to be that person that's going to help you get to the next step. But if you're taking advantage of meeting with your provosts, your presidents, getting to know them any way you can, go in there and ask them about leadership. I encourage you, because what Beth said is correct. I mean, you want to have good relationships, but it starts now. You have to know what you're talking about, get to understand their world. So you're not just talking athletics. You got to understand the bigger picture. Sorry, there you go.
That was great. Thanks. Alex, I saw you chime in too. This is a big one.
Yeah, and I don't want to be redundant, but the one thing I would just try to hammer home is the most, as an AD, the most critical relationship you're going to have is the president. And so as you're going through the interview process or exploring opportunities, that's the first person you need to find out about is what does the president value? Does it align with your values? And then from there, to Eddie's point, when you're on that interview, when you're exploring opportunities, the other cabinet members, senior, you really need to listen to what they have to say. Where are their values? Are their priorities? Does it seem like they want to be partners? Because you are only going to be successful, your student athletes are only going to be successful, particularly at a place like Jacksonville, a smaller institution, private institution where everything's so connected, if those relationships are good. And that's not just AD to president too. If you're a senior associate AD and you're looking at a deputy job, that relationship with the AD is the most important relationship. So how do you jive? How will you jive with that AD as well? And so it's applicable at the senior level of the university, but also at the athletic senior level. So.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, it's an art form. It's a science in managing up. You want to get yourself in a position where you have a strong enough relationship where you can tell them when something's not working and it's not confrontational. I had a vice president that I worked with once. He talked about, he's like, Troy, in these group meetings, I like to feed the president a few compliments on something that happened or something they did, because then in private I might hit them with something to tell them they don't know what they're doing. So you don't have to set up some type of strategy, but it really is the underpinnings of a great relationship. So we're going to I'm going to go through a few more questions with these all, and then with this group, and then you'll have a chance for your full questions. So making an abrupt turn, Beth, the college athletics landscape is literally shifting before our eyes. What are you doing at this moment to manage that, and then in the keeping this all sharp category, what skills would you recommend for future ADs as they get ready to face adversity?
Well, Troy, I appreciate maybe the understated way you mentioned that we got a little bit going on in our industry right now. But I think it's a relevant question. And, it's interesting. I think hopefully we all are 100% dialed into these changes. And I think it's always a really good approach to take in as much information from as many different sources as you can. I personally try not to get caught up in extremes. So, hey, the industry is never going to be the same again, or this isn't going to impact us at all. So I think it's just really important that we are true students and consumers of the industry that we live in and those that are around us. So, whether it is, the results of the Alston case or NIL or transfer landscape, there certainly is a lot going on. And I think what it means to me and what I think it continues to remind me and we continue to talk about as a team here is that we've got to be really true. And this, Eddie mentioned this earlier, but you got to know what your values are. So no matter what new change is going to be in the industry, if you circle back and say, hey, I'm going to take in this information and consider how it impacts us based first on what your values are, what the mission of your particular institution is. If you do that first before you start worrying about what recruiting advantage it might look like or what's going to happen 10 years down the road, I think you're going to be able to serve your particular students and your strategic vision a little bit better if you start there. There's just no doubt we've got to continue to be nimble. We're gonna have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So what we thought about a piece of legislation yesterday, by the time you wake up this morning, might look a little bit different. I think it's incredibly important that not only do we do this with our teams, but in particular with the young staff members that you all are mentoring right now, that we really help them think about things in a big picture, broad picture context. So it's not there's very few decisions that we get to make these days that have one implication. It's, hey, here's the question that came to the table, and you think you have the right answer for this particular student athlete or this particular team, but it's how does it affect the other teams on your campus? How's it affect them today? How's it going to affect them in 5 years? And how are you going to navigate that if these three things change in the landscape? So I think just that strategic sort of, how do you fit the puzzle pieces together, and realizing that you got to play chess. The days of us thinking one checker move at a time is probably long behind us. So, there's in terms of the skills that we need, I think it again just goes back to understanding that once you're, in the chair, and from whatever chair you're in, knowing the information, keeping yourself educated, getting comfortable and being an expert in the political side of what we do on our campuses and our communities, knowing where everybody sits and how those pieces move around are going to be really important. So it's an interesting time. It could be a great time of opportunity, and I think where you want to start to look at it and say, hey, how can we use what's going on today to serve our student athletes that are in front of us while planning for what it could look like in the future?
Yeah, take advantage of the confusion, right? So in dealing with adversity, Alex, Eddie, you both had to cut sports. I'd like to hear your perspective on how you manage that bit of adversity and some of the skills you called upon in those moments.
Yeah, that's this. I'm going to try to be succinct with this because there's a lot there. But to Beth's point about the adversity, that's really in front of us. I think we get caught a lot, and myself included, in looking at NIL and all that transfer and all that's ahead of us and comparing ourselves to other places and what we're doing versus what other places are doing. And really, I think the key to our future is continuing to show value to your president, to your constituents, that athletics brings to the university and the community. How can I prove my value to this place, to this region of the country? And 2 or 3 years ago, I'll tie back to what I talked about with the honeymoon period and setting strategy and really digging into what we needed to do. For us to be successful, we had to look inward on the experience that we were providing our student athletes. And we were playing non-scholarship football at an institution of 2,500 in a market that had the Jaguars and the University of Florida and Florida State all surrounding us. And it just didn't make sense to play football, which is hard to sort of stomach for a lot of people because of the perceived value of football and the true value of football at a lot of places. But at Jacksonville, because the metrics didn't make sense from a retention, from a graduation percentage, graduation rate perspective, from a financial perspective, from a private giving perspective, from a attention of fans perspective, it didn't make sense. And it pulled from our other sports. So it pulled from our 18 other sports and 450 other athletes. And so we made the really difficult decision to no longer play football so that we could reinvest and reinvigorate our department across our other student athletes, across our other sports, And it's a decision that hasn't been made in 10 years. No Division I program had cut football since Northeastern and Hofstra in 2009. It was a great challenge, but it was done in fall 2019 prior to the pandemic. I wish I could say I had a crystal ball about the pandemic, and that's why we did it, but I didn't. And we did it because we thought we could better show our value in other ways by presenting our sports, our student athletes that we had outside of football, to our community, to our fan base, and to this point, or to this day, it's proven to be the right decision for us right now, and I think it will play long into the future is what made sense for us at Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think, again, everybody has their own reasons and directions when it comes to something as unfortunate as cutting sports. Nobody wants to be in that position. I can tell you right now, it's still today probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in this career, this path. And it's we had too many sports at a school that couldn't support it financially. Yes, that's a major piece of the puzzle, but the other piece was we hadn't done a Title IX review of our department in probably 10 plus years before I got there. So in doing so there, we realized we were very skewed in one direction, which we had to make some tough decisions. Before me, they went forward, added beach volleyball as an example. And it was great, but if you don't fund it, you don't support it, you don't do what needs to be done, then it's not really doing it's what its intention to do or is intended to do. So for me, we had to kind of take a step back, look at the whole department, look at where we're going, where we're trying to go, what's the trajectory of where we're trying to end up. And it was hard. It was a difficult decision. Timing, probably looking back now, was really good timing to do it when we did it, because it's allowed us to put our department in a position to be successful today. I mean, we're where we are today because of some of the tough decisions we had to make. And I go back to what I said earlier, we're all going to make some difficult decisions in your positions, in my position, but you have to be one that if you do your due diligence, you work with your vision, the values and everything else, at the end of the day, that's why you're in the leadership position. All of us are in a leadership position. You have to make hard decisions, and you have to make sure you do it for the right reasons. So.
Awesome. So I'm curious, just following up to both of you. I mean, how'd you get through such a tough time? I mean, I've heard of some of the nasty communications ADs get when they cut sports. I mean, what got you through that moment, or maybe who? Well,
if anybody is bored, go and Google up UNM athletics cutting sports, and you're going to read everything from every legislator in the state of New Mexico to the governor, basically scrutinizing me, scolding me, basically trying to get me to, reverse my recommendation. At the end of the day, it was, you have to rely on people that you trust. And that's when your mentors come out more than ever. Everybody says they have mentors, and do you really have mentors? Do you have people that you're calling? Because if you can't pick up the phone and call somebody and say, tell me how you did this and what you went through, because during that part, I was reaching out to people from a communication side, from a ADs that have cut sports, ADs that cut and had to reverse their decisions. I went and did as much due diligence to try to make sure that I got every aspect that I could get. But it's going to come, and I'll tell this to everybody: those decisions, they're going to hard, and they're going to come after you, and you have to be. Listen. I think it's even been documented. It got to a point where I had to send my family out of town for a couple of weeks because of threats and other things that were coming upon me. It's part of it. I get it. But it's not their responsibility for my kids to deal with it. So I had to get them out. That was something I did not know was going to be that severe. But everything you have to adapt. It's basically what we've all lived to the last year and a half. You have to modify, adapt, pivot. All those wonderful words that we've tried to utilize. Is that I pivoted. My wife and I said, okay, this is what we have to do. This is where they need to go. And we persevered and overcame it because we had great people around me. So, Alex.
Yeah, and I think there's a fine line there because it's such a sensitive issue that you have to ensure that the folks that you confide in are trusted. And you can ensure that it's not the information or what's being discussed isn't leaked, because there's nothing worse than if a student athlete or a coach would find out before you're able to make the announcement yourself. And what Eddie said about it being a significant challenge is it was the hardest thing that I ever had to do, to stand in front of 100 young men and tell them that they weren't going to have their sport anymore. But two things that we did that I think helped mitigate some of the backlash was we had the right team that we did communicate with. We put a care team around our student athletes. We had somebody from financial aid, student athlete services, the registrar, compliance, right there for them after that meeting to help, counseling services, to help them through what was going to be an extremely challenging time. That was one. And within that, we were playing non-scholarship football. For those that stayed, we offered full tuition scholarships for them to finish their education, which was obviously the main goal, was to complete and graduate from Jacksonville. And then the last thing we did was I hired a crisis communications firm, and it was something that I was ill prepared to do, to communicate and cut a sport, eliminate a sport, but that was their area of expertise. And so leaning on people that really knew what they were doing really helped mitigate the backlash from the decision that we made. I mean, I still had to move offices for a couple of weeks because I was hearing from coaches and student athletes, but from the public, the scrutiny wasn't as high because of how we delivered the message, and the crisis communication firm that we hired was a significant help. And so I wouldn't, if there's a place to infuse resource during a time like that, it's how you communicate the message, and that's what we decided to do.
Wow. Thank you both for sharing that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of go around the horn one more time. Any words of advice or thoughts to pass on, and then we'll go into questions. So Beth, anything you want to share? Last word?
I think at the end of the day, it's surround yourself with really great people that want to be good teammates, good partners, people that are a lot smarter than you are, and rely on them, and rely on all of your connections and friends and mentors across the industry.
Eddie?
Yeah, I think it's, again, the most important thing is take advantage. First of all, I think we could talk about everything, but take advantage of these opportunities that you're part of today. If you can stay connected to those that are in this room and those that you're meeting, and as I said earlier, take the time to meet those on campus. That's what's going to help you continue to strengthen your mentors. When difficult times happen, those are going to be the individuals that you can reach out to. They know that you've built a relationship. That's going to be important. So I would tell you, do that. And then last but not least, some of them that are on this call that, from Ashley and Andy, Andrew and all that have heard me say this before, roll up your sleeves and become a sponge. If you're not right now, go learn from other people in your department. Go understand why marketing does what marketing does, event management does what event management does, why fundraising does. Be a sponge, because right now you have every ability to be able to learn from people around you, even though you're not in that position itself.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and Beth touched on it at the beginning, is I think everybody in this room is smart enough to have a plan. We all are going to have a plan going into our situation. But if there's one thing you need to remember that I would say would be the good ADs have plans. The best ADs know that they're going to have to adjust their plans. And how do they respond and react when the plan goes awry? I mean, we had all these great ideas for how we were going to reinvest after we made the decision to no longer play football. And then the pandemic hit. right? And so there's a plan that completely went to shit. Excuse my language, but it's how do you adjust and continue forward when things go awry with your plan that you have. It's about making multiple plans. It's about adjusting your plans. It's not stick to the plan at all costs, because that will be an exercise in futility.
Come on, Alex, we're in athletics. We don't speak like that. I mean, we don't hear those kind of words.
Great stuff. Hey, so we'll run through these questions next 15 minutes here. First one I see in the chat is from Renee Miles Payne. Renee, did you want to ask the group, or?
You can ask it.
Okay. Renee asked, would you take a director of athletics job if you didn't report directly to the president, or you were not on the cabinet?
I'd answer for me personally, no. I've learned too much in my 4 years, and people had told me this prior to me having the ability to sit in this chair. But the reality is now, and more than ever, I will not. If that's something that they can't give you that ability to do, then I'd wonder why they're so scared to allow you to have that ability. So that's just me. That's my best suggestion. Don't do it, because you want to make sure that the person you answer to is the person that looks at the bigger picture, which is the university and everything else.
Hey, Alex, Beth?
I think it's a major red flag. I'm not sure I would say no right away. It depends on what your goals are and the level of institution you're working at potentially. And if you don't report directly to the president, what's your relationship with the president? Who is it who you report to? And so while I think it is, to Eddie's point, a major red flag, I would probably learn more about the situation before saying no right away.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think you'd have to ask a lot of questions. It is institutionally dependent.
Yeah.
But I think if they don't recognize some of the challenges, good and bad, and the visibility issues that come with athletics, that might be something you need to learn a lot more about.
Rick Cantor, you have a question from Longwood.
Yep. In an exercise of foresight, with all the changes in college athletics on the horizon, fast forward 10 years from now or today, how would you describe how your institution and department has changed? Has anything become obsolete or deeply emphasized in that time?
Again, I have no problem starting up. I think, first of all, it's hard for anybody to right now think about 10 years. I mean, there's no roadmap for what we're living in right now. So, but the one thing that I can tell you in the 4 years that I've been here, and if we continue to do everything that we've laid out, we will continue to have not just a department that's all involved, all aligned and everything else, all the wonderful tidbits we'd like to use. It's going to be committed and engaged with the community. For us, that was a big thing. And during COVID, we tried to lead by example. And I think, I know we did it. I know we did a great job of it, but it is continue to build off that. It's not just about, I mean, I came here, to be honest with you, Jeremy Foley told me a long time ago, and I know it's hard to say, but if you get in athletics, you have to go to a place that you can have the ability to win championships. And I think that's important, and it has been. So that part is important to me, but it's also not my driver. The drivers are student athletes and everything we do, but it's also engaging them and putting them in the community. So I can tell you today, our department where it is today, and Brandon, who's on this, who works in our department, he can tell you it's night and day. The culture, the people. We've been fortunate to be able to win numerous conference championships this year, and that's all a testament to surround yourself with good people, putting yourself in a position that leads to growth. I want to just mention one little quick bit. We talk about, I talked about Title IX with cutting sports earlier. Our department right now is as close to almost identical to campus than it's ever been. I take that as again, something that we've been able to do and build and do in the right direction. So over the next 10 years, I see our department, if everything continues to be where it is today, in a great situation.
I would just add, well, first, if I could predict 10 years into the future, I'd I'd probably be on a beach somewhere making a lot more money. But I think more than anything, it's and I said it a little earlier, it's adjusting and continuing to show value as an athletics department for your university and for your community. How can you make an impact on where you are through athletics, and being able to adjust to the environment now, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road is going to be critically important. And so having a pulse on the environment while also having a pulse on what the president perceives as valuable, what the board of trustees perceives as valuable, and what the greater community perceives as valuable, will always allow you to find relevance and be able to try to achieve excellence in athletics.
Kathy Rossi, I didn't see your institution here. Do you want to share your question?
Sure, I can read it. I am from UW Milwaukee.
Awesome.
And throughout this talk, each of you have mentioned making decisions that align with your values and working at places where your values align with the president or chancellor. So I'm just curious if each of you have like your own personal defined values that you reflect on when you're making decisions in your career, you know, at your institutions. And if so, could you just share them?
Hey, Kathy. It's good to hear your voice and see you. We've had a chance to work together here in the past, but yeah, I think it's really, you know, critical that we all spend some time figuring out what those are so they don't become situational. You can't really say you value one thing in this scenario and value something else over here. So, and there's certainly a few that I have that I hope you continue to share out loud so that everybody else can hold you accountable to what you have said is important. A few that I think are really important to me is being student-centered and operating from a place of transparency. And I just mentioned those two because any decision you make, you've got to figure out how you're going to do that. And so transparency, for example, I think our team here would probably tell you that I try to make sure we display that. And that's easy to do when you're sharing great news and talking about championships you won this year and the goals you hit in fundraising or whatever it is. But it's also equally hard to stand up when you're delivering bad news or when you have to own a mistake that you made. And so I think not only that you have to be clear about what your values are, I think it's really important that you share those out loud so everyone around you can help you live up to those expectations.
Jason Coomer, you want to share your question with everyone?
Yes, thank you. Jason Coomer, Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, so not too far from Beth, so stomping grounds. You know, my question is with your relationship with your presidents and your chancellors, when you know that there is a time or a initiative where you have to push, you may not get the initial answer that you want the first time, but you also know you have to walk back into your building with a staff that depends and relies on you for a lot of things because it impacts their lives as well, the success of the department. So how do you balance being told no once, but revisiting later on with maybe a different set of circumstances while maintaining that collegial and that respectful manner in bringing that back to your boss?
I'll think for me, you're going to have, first of all, again, those conversations that you have with your president and the time that you do have to go to them, she or her or him, anyone who it is, and be able to get their guidance or their approval. Part of it starts with making sure your staff knows why you're going over there and you having a good understanding of how you need to approach it with them. I know there's certain people on campus that will approach our president requesting certain things and they get shot down quicker than before they even get in the room. The reality is you have to understand how to communicate, how to get the message to the president the right way. What is the way that they want to be able to understand it? And what are the key points to making sure they understand why you're presenting them? Ultimately, you're not going to win every battle. And you got to understand that he's got to make decisions that are that are in the best interest of the whole university. If you have that mindset going in as an AD, that this is not just athletics, this is bigger, then you have a better shot. But when it doesn't happen, you can't let it stop you from moving forward. But you have to refocus. And if it is something that's truly important, you have to find a different way to present it and figure out why you can make it work for the university as well as athletics.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I'm sitting here thinking, and one of our core values is be original. And within that, we try to articulate that we need to succeed through unconventional means. And so when we are told no or to come back later, I think the relationship with your president is so important, because it's about having a conversation in the moment when you're told no. If you're told no and it ends there, well, it's going to be really hard to come back and adjust what you're thinking if it was just a straight no. And what I mean by that is, if you present an idea and they're cold to it or not turned on to it, we'll ask them questions about what might make most sense, or how can I go about this differently, or how would you value this, or why would this make sense to you if I presented it differently. And so I think it's about the follow-up conversation in the moment when you might not agree on something, so that you have an understanding of if it makes sense to come back another time or not. And if it does, you can evaluate his or her answers, evaluate what you're trying to do, and come back and have another productive conversation the second or third time around.
Awesome. Mitch Straub from Washington State.
Thanks, Troy. I have a question for Eddie. Eddie, you had a difficult decision to make to relocate your football team to Las Vegas for a significant portion of your season. Can you talk about how you navigated that and worked with the state on either justifying your decision or working with you in getting them relocated?
Everybody can hear me? I just want to make sure I start with it. So I don't know if that is the one true example of making a decision and standing by it for me. I knew I was not going to win this battle when it came to our governor. I mean, I basically went straight against my governor and our legislators that basically said, we are not to compete. We're not to do any kind of practicing, anything else. I knew that wasn't the right decision. I tried to present every opportunity to them that laid out why this was a benefit, not just to our student athletes, but to the community, to our athletic department, to every aspect. And there was no willingness from their part to want to open up that discussion. So for me, I knew where I was, and I knew at the end of the day, if it was about getting our student athletes in a position to be successful, I had to make some strong decisions. And that ultimately became a decision to, let's relocate. What can we do to relocate them? And how is it going to be for us to be able to do that with the challenges of our governor? So long story short, I made a decision, relocated them. Financially, it was $4 million back to our athletic department from TV rights and everything else. If I wouldn't have played, I wouldn't have had it. So when I say that to you today, apologize, a lot of people coming in right now. One of the things I'll tell you is if it's the right decision, it's for the betterment of our student athletes, I'll never regret my decision. And yes, I'm still getting kicked in the gut today because of it, and that's okay. I'm actually got a meeting July 7th with the governor. It will be a fun one. I can promise you that. She's going to do everything she can to make it known that it wasn't a good decision to go against her. So I got to do it. I'll pay my dues. But at the end of the day, our student athletes benefited. They did it. They did it the right way. Sorry about that, yo.
So yeah, it's great. It's tough. The ability to decide, and I think you've heard it in a few different ways, a few different instances from Alex, Beth, and Eddie. It's one of those things that you kind of prepare for mentally and try to refine theories on it and practices and read all these books. And but as Alex said, when you get in the moment, you also have to be able to adjust and identify all the key variables. So we're going to close it with that.